Welcome to Bedtime Science. Tonight we travel slowly across continents and centuries, visiting the quiet rituals that different cultures have built around the simple act of falling asleep. Before we begin our journey, did you know that in parts of Scandinavia, parents leave their infants outside in freezing temperatures, sometimes as cold as -10 degrees Celsius, for their afternoon naps, and have done so for more than 100 years? Or that before electric light existed, most Europeans slept in two separate phases each night, waking for an hour or two in the middle of darkness to pray, talk, or simply lie still. Or that in Japan, there is a word, Inemuri, that describes the socially accepted practice of falling asleep during a workplace meeting, and that doing so can actually signal dedication rather than laziness. Every culture on Earth sleeps. That's universal. Yet almost no two cultures sleep the same way. The bedroom, the schedule, the posture, the company you keep while unconscious, all of these vary from one society to the next in ways that run deeper than simple preference. Tonight, we will gently explore 100 of these differences. We will find out about the architecture of sleep, who sleeps alone, who sleeps together, and why those choices matter. We will trace the lost tradition of two-phase sleeping in pre-industrial Europe. We will visit the quiet rules governing public napping in Japanese offices. And we will follow the thread of biology beneath all of it: the drop in body temperature, the suppression of melatonin, the slow tilt of the nervous system from waking to rest. These are small observations. None of them demand anything from you. They are here to keep your mind gently occupied while the rest of you prepares for sleep. Before we begin, if you find comfort here tonight, please consider subscribing to join our quiet community. Or, if you are still awake, leave a soft comment below about what forgotten tradition we should explore next. Now let us begin. Every culture needs a place to sleep. That sounds obvious, but the shape of that place, its size, its boundaries, who else is in it, tells you something about what a society believes sleep is for. Here is our first fact. Fact 1. In many indigenous cultures across South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, sleep is a communal activity. Families sleep together in a single room, often on shared mats or in hammocks strung a few feet apart. The Western convention of isolating each sleeper in a private bedroom behind a closed door is historically unusual. For most of human history, sleeping alone meant something had gone wrong: exile, illness, punishment. The background sounds of other people breathing, shifting, murmuring in dreams, these were the normal soundtrack of nighttime rest. Silence was the anomaly. Fact 2. The Guajajara people of northeastern Brazil sleep in hammocks inside shared longhouses. A single dwelling might hold several families. The hammocks hang in parallel rows, close enough that a person could reach out and touch the one beside them. This proximity isn't a compromise forced by limited space. It's deliberate. Sleeping near others is considered protective, a form of warmth and watchfulness woven into the architecture itself. The longhouse roof, made from babasu palm leaves, filters rain and holds in the low heat of banked cooking fires through the night. Fact 3. Across many Amazonian communities, someone is always partly awake during the night. This isn't insomnia. It's a pattern researchers have called sentinel sleeping or distributed vigilance. Different members of a group cycle through lighter and deeper phases of rest at staggered intervals. So at any given hour, at least one person is alert enough to notice a sound or a movement. This pattern exists in dozens of species: birds, meerkats, dolphins. Among humans, It may have been the default for tens of thousands of years before consolidated eight-hour sleep became a cultural norm. Fact 4. The Hadza people of northern Tanzania sleep on the ground, typically on thin animal hides or woven mats. A research team led by David Sampson and Charlie Nunn studied Hadza sleep patterns using wrist-mounted actigraphy devices, small sensors that track movement through the night. They found that out of more than 200 hours of recorded nighttime data, there were only 18 minutes during which every member of the group was fully asleep at the same time. 18 minutes. The rest of the time, someone was always stirring, shifting, or sitting up. Fact 5. The concept of a private bedroom emerged slowly in European history. In medieval Europe, even wealthy households slept communally. Servants slept in the same room as their employers. Guests shared beds with strangers at inns, a practice so routine that etiquette guides existed to govern which side of the bed a guest should take and how to behave if your bedmate snored. The idea that a person deserves an enclosed, personal room for sleep only became widespread in Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries, and it tracked closely with the rise of individualism as a cultural value. Fact 6. Japanese homes traditionally used futons, not the thick Western sofa-style furniture, but thin cotton mattresses rolled out each evening on tatami mat floors. In the morning, the futons are folded and stored in closets. The room that served as a bedroom at night becomes a living space during the day. This isn't a workaround for small apartments. It predates the modern housing crunch by centuries. The Japanese futon system treats sleep not as something that requires a dedicated room, but as an activity that temporarily occupies shared space and then quietly disappears. Fact 7. In parts of rural India, families sleep on charpas, simple wooden frame beds woven with rope or cotton cord. During hot months, these are carried outside onto rooftops or into courtyards. The open air provides cooling that indoor rooms cannot. Entire neighborhoods sleep outdoors together, with the sounds of other families settling in audible across low walls and hedgerows. Sleep happens within the community, not apart from it. The charpa itself weighs little, maybe 10 or 12 kilograms, and can be moved by one person. Fact 8. The hammock, as a sleeping technology, is at least 1,000 years old in the Americas. When Spanish colonists first encountered hammocks in the Caribbean, they adopted them almost immediately for use on ships. A hammock swings with the motion of the vessel rather than sliding across a flat surface. It also takes up less space than a fixed bunk. By the 16th century, hammocks were standard equipment in European navies. A technology developed for tropical forest sleeping found its second life on the open ocean. Fact 9. In Korea, the Ondal system heated sleeping surfaces from below. A network of stone channels ran beneath the floor, carrying hot air from a wood or charcoal fire at one end of the house. The stone floor radiated warmth upward through layers of oiled paper. Families slept directly on this heated floor, sometimes with only a thin mat between their bodies and the warm stone. Ondal systems have been found in archaeological sites dating back to the 1st century BCE. The principle, warming the surface you sleep on rather than the air around you, is thermally efficient in ways that modern central heating is not. Fact 10. Sleeping platforms raised off the ground appear in cultures across Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Pacific Islands. The reasons vary. In tropical forests, elevation keeps sleepers away from ground-dwelling insects, snakes, and moisture. In flood-prone river regions, raised platforms protect against seasonal water rise. Among the Ifugao people of the northern Philippines, sleeping platforms inside wooden houses sit roughly a meter above the floor. The space beneath is used for storage. The platform itself is made from smoothed wooden planks, sometimes covered with woven rattan. Fact 11. The earliest known purpose-built beds come from a site called Border Cave in the Lebombo Mountains of South Africa. Archaeologists found layers of compacted grass and ash dating back roughly 77,000 years. The ash wasn't accidental. It appears to have been deliberately mixed with the bedding material. Certain types of ash repel insects. Someone 77,000 years ago figured out that sleeping on a bed of grass mixed with campfire ash meant fewer tick bites during the night. Fact 12. In medieval Japan, aristocrats of the Heian period, roughly the 9th through 12th centuries, slept behind standing screens called kicho. These screens were draped with silk and served a dual purpose. They blocked drafts and created a zone of visual privacy in otherwise open-plan palace rooms. The screens didn't reach the ceiling. Sound traveled freely above them. Privacy in this context meant not being seen, not being unheard. Fact 13. The four-poster bed, now associated with luxury and period dramas, originally served a practical function. Curtains hung from the posts to trap body heat close to the sleeper in unheated stone buildings. In a medieval English manor, the great bed might be the most expensive single object in the house, worth more than livestock, more than tools, more than clothing. Beds were listed in wills and passed down across generations. When Shakespeare left his wife, Anne Hathaway, his second-best bed, that bequest carried real financial weight. Fact 14. Sleeping bags as a technology emerged from multiple traditions independently. Arctic peoples, including the Inuit, developed sleeping enclosures made from caribou hide with the fur facing inward. The insulation properties of caribou fur are tied to the structure of each hair, hollow, air-filled shafts that trap warmth. European mountaineers began developing their own versions in the mid-19th century, using wool and later down feathers. The principle is the same across both. Surround the body with a dead air layer to slow heat loss. Fact 15. In parts of West Africa, particularly among Akan communities in Ghana, sleeping mats are woven from specific grasses selected for their cooling properties. The type of grass, the tightness of the weave, and the width of the mat all communicate something about the sleeper's status and age. An elder's mat differs from a child's. A mat given as a wedding gift carries different patterns than one used for everyday rest. The object you sleep on holds meaning beyond its function. These first observations describe how cultures shape the physical space of sleep, the platforms, the mats, the shared rooms and private curtains. The next group of facts traces something different: how people across Europe once divided the night itself into two distinct halves. Fact 16. Before the spread of electric lighting, most Europeans experienced sleep in two separate phases. They called them first sleep and second sleep. The pattern appears in hundreds of written sources, diaries, court records, medical texts, prayer books, novels, spanning from the medieval period through the early 19th century. Historian Roger Eckerch, working at Virginia Tech, spent 16 years gathering these references. He found the two-sleep pattern described so casually, so matter-of-factly, that it was clearly the ordinary expectation of how night worked. Fact 17. The interval between first and second sleep typically lasted 1 to 2 hours. People woke naturally without alarm or disturbance, usually sometime around midnight. What they did during this interval varied. Some lay quietly in the dark, some prayed, some talked with a spouse or bedmate, Some got up to tend the fire, check on animals, or use the chamber pot. The interval wasn't anxious. It was expected, a scheduled pocket of quiet wakefulness tucked into the middle of the night. Fact 18. 17th century physicians considered the interval between sleeps medically significant. They recommended it as a good time for digestion, the logic being that the body's first round of sleep had settled the stomach. Some doctors advised patients to turn from one side to the other during the break, believing this aided circulation. Others recommended the interval for sexual intercourse, arguing that fertility was enhanced when the body had already rested and was well disposed. This wasn't folk wisdom. It appeared in published medical treatises. Fact 19. Christian prayer books from the 15th and 16th centuries included specific devotions written for the interval between sleeps. These weren't emergency prayers for insomniacs. They were scheduled liturgical content, prayers for waking between the first and second sleep. The existence of these printed texts tells us that publishers expected a market. Enough people woke reliably at this hour that it was worth typesetting and binding prayers tailored to the moment. Fact 20. The French referred to the interval as dorveil, a word that blends dormir to sleep and veiller to wake or to watch. The term captures the in-between quality of the experience, not fully asleep, not fully alert, but resting in a liminal state. English had no single equivalent word. Instead, people used descriptive phrases, the watching or the waking, that positioned the experience as a recognized part of the night rather than a disruption. Fact 21. Roger Eckertch's research suggests that the two-sleep pattern began to disappear in Northern Europe during the late 17th century, starting in urban areas. The cause was artificial light. As street lamps, coffee houses, and domestic candles grew cheaper and more widely available, the evening expanded. People stayed awake longer into the night. The first sleep shifted later and later until it merged with the second sleep into a single consolidated block. By the 1920s, references to first sleep and second sleep had largely vanished from common usage in English. Fact 22. The disappearance of two-phase sleep moved outward from cities to rural areas over roughly 2 centuries. Urban residents, exposed to gaslit streets and evening entertainment, consolidated their sleep first. Rural communities, where artificial light remained expensive and scarce, held onto the older pattern longer. In some remote regions of rural Greece and parts of Nigeria, variants of the two-sleep pattern were documented well into the 20th century. Fact 23. In the early 1990s, sleep researcher Thomas Weyer at the National Institute of Mental Health in Bethesda, Maryland, ran an experiment. He placed volunteers in an environment with 14 hours of darkness each day, mimicking winter night length in pre-industrial conditions. No screens, no electric light, just darkness from 6 in the evening until 8 in the morning. Within a few weeks, the subjects spontaneously began sleeping in 2 phases, with a quiet waking interval of 1 to 2 hours between them. The pattern that Eckertch had found in historical texts reappeared in a modern laboratory. Fact 24. During Weyer's experiment, blood samples taken during the waking interval showed elevated levels of prolactin, a hormone associated with calm, with the sensation of peaceful satisfaction, and with the same brain state observed during deep meditation. The subjects didn't report anxiety during their midnight wakefulness. They reported tranquility. The interval between sleeps, it seemed, wasn't a failure of sleep, but a distinct neurochemical state. A third mode between sleeping and waking that modern consolidated sleep has largely eliminated. Fact 25. In pre-industrial Europe, the hours after first sleep were sometimes the quietest period of the entire day. Noise from streets had ceased. Household members who shared a bed were awake but still. The fire had burned low. This was considered a good time for reflection, for conversation too private for daytime, and for creative thought. Several writers of the period described their best ideas arriving during this interval. It was a thinking hour embedded in the middle of the night. Fact 26. The transition from two-phase sleep to consolidated sleep didn't happen without resistance. In the 18th century, some English writers complained about the pressure to stay awake later into the evening for social obligations. They described feeling unwell from missing their accustomed first sleep. Their bodies still expected the older rhythm. Adaptation wasn't instant. It took generations for consolidated sleep to feel normal, and for anyone to forget that it had ever been different. Fact 27. Segmented sleep patterns existed far beyond Europe. In parts of pre-colonial Nigeria, among the Tiv people, the night was divided into named periods. The first period of sleep and the second period of sleep had distinct terms in the Tiv language. Activities appropriate to each period were socially understood. Children learned the rhythm the same way they learned meal times, through repetition and cultural expectation rather than biological instruction. Fact 28. The consolidation of sleep into a single block is now so deeply embedded in Western culture that waking in the middle of the night is classified as a sleep disorder. The clinical term is middle-of-the-night insomnia, or sleep maintenance insomnia. Eckarch has argued that for some patients, this diagnosis pathologizes what may be a natural reversion to a much older sleep pattern. Not everyone who wakes at 2 in the morning is experiencing a medical problem. Some of them may simply be experiencing a first and second sleep without knowing it. Fact 29. During the era of two-phase sleep, night watchmen in European cities called the hours. In London, a bellman walked the streets calling out the time and the weather. Past 2 o'clock and a cold, frosty morning. These calls served as orientation for people lying awake during the interval, a shared temporal marker in a world without bedside clocks. You knew roughly what time it was because you could hear someone announcing it outside your window. Fact 30. The phrase sleeping through the night, now used as a milestone for infant development, would have puzzled most Europeans before the 19th century. No one slept through the night. The night had a seam in it, and everyone knew where it was. The expectation that a human body should produce 7 or 8 hours of unbroken unconsciousness is a product of industrial-era scheduling and electric light, not of biology. The two-sleep tradition reveals how much of what we consider normal about rest is shaped by technology and social pressure, rather than by the body's own preferences. From here, we cross into a different tradition, one where sleep doesn't retreat into the private night at all, but appears openly in the middle of the working day. Fact 31. In Japan, the practice of Inemuri, which translates roughly as sleeping while present, describes the act of dozing in a public or social setting. It's not the same as napping at home. Inemuri specifically means falling asleep while you are supposed to be doing something else, attending a meeting, riding a train, sitting in a university lecture. The word itself signals that you have not left the social situation. You are still present. You are simply also asleep. Fact 32. Inemuri operates under a set of unwritten rules that most Japanese adults understand intuitively. The most important rule involves posture. An acceptable Inemuri looks like someone struggling to stay awake, head nodding, eyes closing against their will, body still oriented toward the speaker or the front of the room. An unacceptable nap looks like someone who has chosen to sleep lying across chairs, head on the desk, body fully reclined. The difference is intention, or at least the appearance of intention. Fact 33. Seniority matters. A department head who closes his eyes during a long internal status meeting is demonstrating, in the cultural reading, that he has worked so hard he can barely stay conscious. A new hire who does the same thing is demonstrating disrespect. The same behavior carries opposite meanings depending on the rank of the sleeper. This isn't written in any employee handbook. It's absorbed through observation over years of working life. Fact 34. Context also governs Inemuri. Long internal meetings, the kind where weekly reports are read aloud, are zones where brief dozing is tolerated. Client-facing meetings are not. Presentations where your own work is being reviewed are not. High-stakes negotiations are not. The distinction tracks with how much personal accountability is active in the moment. When your individual performance is being evaluated, sleep signals weakness. When you're one of 30 people listening to routine updates, sleep signals exhaustion from diligence. Fact 35. Inemuri on public transit in Japan is so common that it's barely noticed. Commuters on the Takeido Shinkansen, the bullet train connecting Tokyo and Osaka, frequently fall asleep within minutes of departure. Some passengers set their phone alarms for the stop before theirs. Others develop an internal sense of timing that wakes them at the right station. The train is one of the most socially accepted places in Japan to be visibly asleep, and one of the safest, given the low crime rate in rail cars. Fact 36. The cultural roots of Inemuri are debated. Some scholars connect it to Buddhist traditions of seated meditation, where closing the eyes in a group setting has a long spiritual precedent. Others tie it to the extreme working hours common in Japan's post-war economic boom, when sleeping at your desk was literal evidence that you had been working since dawn. The practice may draw from both sources, spiritual calm and economic exhaustion layered on top of each other over decades. Fact 37. Japanese schoolchildren also practice a form of structured rest. In many elementary schools after lunch, students rest their heads on their desks for a short period. This isn't formal napping. The children are not expected to fall asleep. The practice, called Hurun or sometimes Oharun, is a brief pause between the morning's lessons and the afternoons. Some schools play soft music during this time. Others simply dim the lights. The room goes still for 10 or 15 minutes. Fact 38. The word nap itself has an old history in English. It comes from the Old English napian, meaning to doze or to sleep lightly. In its earliest uses, napping carried no negative connotation. It was simply a description of brief, light sleep. The association of napping with laziness is relatively recent, tied to the industrial era idea that productive hours should be continuous, and that breaking them with sleep represents a failure of discipline. Fact 39. Spain's siesta tradition is probably the most widely known example of culturally scheduled daytime sleep. The word siesta comes from the Latin hora sexta, the sixth hour, referring to the sixth hour after dawn, which falls roughly at noon. By the time the Roman Empire had established its administrative rhythms across Iberia, the midday pause was already embedded in daily life. Spain inherited it and kept it for centuries. Fact 40. The traditional Spanish siesta lasted about 2 hours. Shops closed, streets emptied. Office workers went home for a large midday meal and then rested before returning to work in the cooler late afternoon. This rhythm made thermal sense in a climate where summer temperatures regularly exceeded 35 degrees Celsius. Working through the hottest part of the day was not just uncomfortable, it was physiologically inefficient. Fact 41. The the siesta is declining in modern urban Spain. A 2009 survey found that fewer than 60% of Spaniards reported napping regularly, down from higher levels in earlier decades. The shift is driven by changes in work structure, specifically the move toward continuous work schedules modeled on Northern European norms. When your office doesn't close for 2 hours at midday, the siesta becomes impractical. The tradition persists more strongly in rural areas and among older populations. Fact 42. Across the Mediterranean, similar midday rest traditions exist under different names. In Italy, the riposo or pennicella empties streets in southern towns between roughly 1 and 4 in the afternoon. In Greece, the mesomery, the midday period, is treated as a time when phone calls and visits are considered rude. The biological basis is the same in all cases. The human circadian system produces a natural dip in alertness roughly 7 to 8 hours after waking, usually falling between 1 and 3 in the afternoon. 43. This afternoon dip in alertness isn't cultural, it's physiological. It appears in laboratory studies of subjects kept in constant conditions, no time cues, no meals, no social obligations. Core body temperature drops slightly, reaction time slow, subjective sleepiness rises. The dip occurs whether or not the subject ate lunch, which debunks the popular idea that afternoon drowsiness is caused by a heavy meal. The meal may deepen it, but the dip exists independently. Fact 44. China has a tradition of wushui, the afternoon rest, that is written into the daily schedule of schools, factories, and some government offices. In many Chinese workplaces, the lunch break extends to 2 hours specifically to accommodate a short nap. Workers rest at their desks, in break rooms, or on folding cots kept in storage. Some office buildings include dedicated nap rooms. The practice is treated as a component of public health rather than an indulgence. Fact 45. In parts of the Middle East, the Kailula, a short nap after the midday meal, has religious and cultural support. Some hadith, the recorded sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, describe the Kailula as a beneficial practice. Whether the nap is observed varies widely by region and individual, but its presence in the hadith literature gives it a moral dimension absent from purely secular nap traditions. Fact 46. NASA conducted a study in the 1990s on the effects of short naps on pilot alertness during long-haul flights. Pilots who napped for 26 minutes showed a 34% improvement in performance and a 54% improvement in alertness compared to pilots who did not nap. The results were specific to that nap duration. Longer naps sometimes produced sleep inertia, a groggy, disoriented state on waking that temporarily impaired performance worse than the original fatigue. Fact 47. The stigma against daytime napping in English-speaking cultures intensified during the Industrial Revolution. Factory schedules demanded continuous presence from workers. Sleep during working hours was punishable. The clock, not the body, determined when rest was appropriate. Over several generations, this industrial rhythm became internalized as a moral framework. Napping was recast as a character flaw, a sign of indolence rather than a response to a biological signal. Fact 48. Winston Churchill was a well-known advocate of the afternoon nap. He claimed that a short sleep after lunch effectively gave him 2 working days in one. He slept in an actual bed, undressed, and under the covers, not a quick doze in a chair. His staff structured the wartime schedule of 10 Downing Street around this daily rest. Churchill considered anyone who didn't nap to be operating at a disadvantage. Fact 49. Sleep pods, enclosed reclining capsules designed for short naps in workplaces, have appeared in the offices of companies like Google, Ben and Jerry's, and several major law firms in the United States. The pods recline to a position that elevates the feet slightly above the heart, play gentle sounds, and wake the sleeper with light vibrations after a preset period. Their presence in American offices represents a partial reversal of the industrial-era prohibition on workplace sleep, though the reversal frames napping as a productivity tool rather than a right. Fact 50. The siesta, the Inemuri, the Washui, and the Kailula all respond to the same biological fact. Humans are not built for a single unbroken block of wakefulness lasting 16 hours. The afternoon dip is real. It's measurable. The only thing that varies is whether a given culture treats that dip as a signal to be obeyed or a weakness to be overcome. These observations chart how different societies handle sleep during the day. The next set of facts follows an even older practice, placing children outdoors in cold air for their naps, and traces the reasoning behind it. Fact 51. In Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, and Iceland, it is common to see baby prams parked outside cafes, apartment buildings, and daycare centers with infants sleeping inside them in cold weather. Temperatures can be well below freezing. The babies are bundled in wool, down, and sheepskin. The prams often have rain covers, and the children sleep. Parents monitor them through baby alarms or by checking periodically through a window. Fact 52. The practice dates back at least to the early 20th century in Scandinavia. Its origins are partly medical. In the 1920s and 1930s, Nordic physicians promoted fresh air as a treatment for respiratory illness, particularly tuberculosis. The logic extended to infant care. Cold, clean outdoor air was believed to strengthen the lungs and the immune system. Whether or not the original medical reasoning holds up, the cultural practice outlasted the theory that generated it. Fact 53. A Finnish study published in the journal Pediatrics in 2008 found that children who napped outdoors in cold air slept longer than those who napped indoors. The outdoor nappers also fell asleep more quickly. Parents reported that their children seemed calmer and less fussy after outdoor naps. The study didn't establish a clear mechanism. Whether the cold itself, the fresh air, the absence of indoor noise, or some combination was responsible, but the correlation was consistent. Fact 54. The temperature threshold varies by family and region, but many Scandinavian parents consider -10 degrees Celsius roughly the lower limit for outdoor napping. Below that, most bring the baby inside. The key to safety, according to Nordic parenting guides, is layering wool-based layers against the skin, insulating middle layers, and a windproof outer layer. Overheating is considered more dangerous than cold exposure. A well-bundled infant in a pram generates enough body heat to maintain a stable core temperature, as long as the layering is correct. Fact 55. This practice occasionally startles visitors from other climates. A widely reported incident occurred in 1997 when a Danish woman named Annette Sorensen left her 14-month-old daughter in a pram outside a restaurant in New York City while she ate inside. She was arrested. The case became a touchpoint for cultural differences in parenting norms. What was unremarkable in Copenhagen was criminal in Manhattan. The charges were eventually dropped. Fact 56. In Iceland, the practice is called Utisveffen, literally outside sleep. Daycare centers in Reykjavik routinely line prams up outside the building during nap time, Staff check the children at regular intervals. Parents sign consent forms. The practice is integrated into the official daycare schedule. It isn't treated as adventurous or alternative. It's simply how nap time works. Fact 57. The biological logic behind cold air napping connects to a broader principle of thermoregulation. Sleep onset is linked to a drop in core body temperature. The body needs to lose heat to fall asleep. This is why a warm bath before bed helps, not because the warmth makes you sleepy, but because stepping out of the bath causes rapid heat loss through the dilated blood vessels of the skin. Cold air surrounding a well-insulated infant may achieve a similar effect. The cool air draws heat from the face and exposed skin, triggering the thermal cascade that initiates sleep. Fact 58. Indoor air quality is another factor. In Scandinavian winters, homes are sealed tightly against the cold. Indoor air can become stale, low in oxygen relative to outdoor air, and carrying the byproducts of heating systems, cooking, and human respiration. Outdoor air, even when cold, is fresh. The infant sleeping outside is breathing cleaner air than the infant sleeping in a closed bedroom. This doesn't prove outdoor napping is healthier, but it introduces a variable that indoor-only sleeping ignores. Fact 59. The practice presumes a level of social safety that not all environments provide. Parents leave their children unattended on sidewalks and in courtyards because crime rates in Scandinavian cities are low enough to make this feel reasonable. In neighborhoods where street-level safety is uncertain, the same practice would carry different risks. The cultural willingness to leave an infant outside is inseparable from the social conditions that make it feel safe. Fact 60. The Spanish siesta and the Scandinavian outdoor nap represent opposite thermal strategies for the same biological need. In Spain, people retreat indoors during the hottest part of the day to avoid overheating. In Scandinavia, people place infants outdoors in the coldest air to promote cooling. Both practices recognize that temperature regulates sleep. One works by avoidance, the other works by exposure. The target is the same. Bring the body to the thermal condition where sleep arrives most easily. Fact 61. In Guatemala, among some Maya communities, infants are carried in a cloth sling, a rebozo or similar wrap, against their mother's body for most of the day and night. Sleep is not a separate activity for the infant. It happens in motion against warmth to the rhythm of the mother's walking and breathing. The child sleeps when the body signals sleep, not when a clock or a schedule dictates it. There is no fixed nap time because the child is always in a position where napping is possible. Fact 62. In Bali, for the first 210 days of life, a full Balinese calendar cycle, an infant is traditionally not allowed to touch the ground. The child is held constantly by family members. Sleep happens in someone's arms. This practice is tied to the belief that the newborn is still partly in the spirit world. Allowing the child's feet to touch the earth too soon risks calling the spirit world's attention. The sleep environment is human contact, uninterrupted and warm. Fact 63. The concept of a dedicated nursery, a room designed exclusively for a baby's sleep, is a Western invention of the 18th and 19th centuries. In most of the world's cultures, past and present, infants sleep wherever the family sleeps. The nursery separates the child's sleep from the parent's presence, which is precisely the opposite of what most non-Western cultures consider safe. Co-sleeping in various forms remains the global norm. Fact 64. Bedtime routines, bath, story, song, lights out, are a relatively modern invention as a standardized sequence. In pre-industrial households, the transition to sleep was governed by darkness and fatigue. not by a scripted series of activities. The modern bedtime routine emerged partly from pediatric advice literature in the 20th century, which emphasized consistency and predictability as tools for helping children fall asleep in isolated bedrooms. The routine replaces the sensory reassurance of a nearby parent with a predictable sequence of events. Fact 65. In Mongolia, among herding families living in jurs, the round felt tent sometimes called yurts, the entire family sleeps in a single room arranged around a central stove. The stove burns dried animal dung, which produces a low, steady heat through the night. The family arranges their bedding in a circle, feet toward the stove, heads toward the walls. The youngest children sleep nearest the parents. Older children and grandparents take positions further out. The arrangement follows an unspoken map of care and warmth. We've traced how cultures arrange the bodies of children and adults for sleep, outdoors, indoors, alone, together, in heat and in cold. The next set of facts moves into different territory. What cultures believe happens to the mind during sleep, and what they believe visits the sleeper in the dark. Fact 66. In many Amazonian societies, dreams are not treated as private psychological events. They are treated as real experiences. A hunter who dreams of a jaguar has, in the cultural understanding, encountered a jaguar. A woman who dreams of a dead relative has spoken with that relative. The dream is not a metaphor. It is a report from another layer of the world, a layer accessible only during sleep. Fact 67. Among the Achuar people of the Ecuadorian Amazon, families gather before dawn to share their dreams aloud. The practice is called wayas. Each person describes what they saw and experienced during sleep. Other family members interpret the dreams, looking for guidance about the coming day, where to hunt, whether to travel, whom to trust. The morning dream-sharing session is a planning meeting conducted with material drawn from the unconscious. Fact 68. In traditional Australian Aboriginal cultures, the concept of the dreaming, sometimes called the dream time, refers not to the act of sleeping, but to a foundational era of creation. The terminology can mislead outsiders into thinking the dreaming is about sleep. It isn't exactly. But the connection between sleep, dreams, and the ancestral creative period is real in Aboriginal cosmology. Certain dreams are understood as communication with ancestral beings. Sleep is a doorway to a layer of reality that contains the origins of everything. Fact 69. Pages, shamans in Amazonian communities, use sleep and dreams as tools for healing. A page may enter a controlled sleep or trance state to communicate with spirits believed to cause or cure illness. The content of the page's dream determines the treatment. If the spirit reveals a particular plant, that plant is gathered. If the spirit describes a ritual, that ritual is performed. The page's sleep is a diagnostic procedure, the Amazonian equivalent of an MRI, conducted in darkness and silence rather than in a hospital. Fact 70. Sleep paralysis, the experience of waking up unable to move, often accompanied by a sense of pressure on the chest and a feeling of a presence in the room, appears in cultures worldwide under dozens of names. In Japan, it's called kanashibari, which translates to bound by metal. In Newfoundland, it's the old hag, a figure who sits on the sleeper's chest. In Thailand, it's Phi Am, a ghost who presses down on the body during sleep. In Turkey, the term is karabasan, the dark presser. Fact 71. The physiological basis of sleep paralysis is well understood. During REM sleep, the phase associated with vivid dreaming, the brain suppresses voluntary muscle movement through a process called atonia. This prevents the sleeper from physically acting out dreams. Occasionally, the mind wakes before atonia releases. The person is conscious but cannot move. The feeling of a presence or a weight on the chest may be the brain's attempt to explain the sensation of paralysis by generating a hallucinatory figure. Fact 72. Despite the shared physiology, the cultural interpretation of sleep paralysis varies dramatically. In medical contexts, it's a benign neurological event. In communities where spirit possession is a recognized category of experience, the same event is understood as an encounter with a specific entity. The body does the same thing. The meaning changes entirely depending on the framework available to the person experiencing it. Fact 73. The English word nightmare preserves a trace of this older understanding. The mare in nightmare isn't a female horse. It comes from the Old English mare, a word for a supernatural being that sits on the sleeper's chest. The nightmare was originally not a bad dream. It was a creature, a thing that visited you. The word drifted over centuries from describing an external entity to describing an internal psychological experience. A shift that mirrors the broader Western transition from spiritual to neurological explanations of sleep phenomena. Fact 74. In pre-industrial Europe, the hours of night carried different spiritual weights. The period between midnight and 3 in the morning was sometimes called the witching hour, a time when the boundary between the natural and supernatural was thought to be thinnest. This belief may have practical roots. The deepest phase of sleep occurs in the first half of the night, and hypnagogic hallucinations are more common during sleep transitions. A person waking during the first to second sleep interval in a dark, silent house might genuinely perceive shapes, sounds, and presences that aren't there. Fact 75. Lucid dreaming, the state of being aware that you are dreaming while the dream continues, has been documented across cultures for centuries. Tibetan Buddhist monks developed dream yoga, a systematic practice of cultivating awareness within dreams, at least as early as the 8th century CE. The practice isn't recreational. It's considered a form of spiritual training, a way to recognize the constructed nature of experience, waking or otherwise. Fact 76. In the laboratory, lucid dreaming has been verified using a technique developed by Stephen LaBerge at Stanford University in the 1980s. Subjects trained in lucid dreaming were asked to signal from within a dream by moving their eyes in a predetermined pattern, for example, left, right, left, right. Because eye movements during REM sleep correspond to the dreamer's perceived gaze direction, the pattern showed up on the electrooculagram recording. The dreamers were verifiably asleep, verifiably dreaming, and verifiably aware. Fact 77. In Senegal, among Wolof communities, dreams involving deceased relatives are treated with particular seriousness. A dream in which a dead family member asks for something, food, prayer, attention, is understood as a genuine request. The family may respond by preparing a meal, offering prayers, or performing a ritual. The dream functions as ongoing communication between the living and the dead, with sleep as the medium through which the message passes. Fact 78. Night watches, the practice of assigning someone to stay awake while others sleep, appear in cultures from ancient Rome to medieval Europe to indigenous North America. The Roman military divided the night into 4 vigiliae, each lasting roughly 3 hours. Sentries rotated through these watches. The word vigil comes from this practice. To keep vigil originally meant to stay awake during the night on behalf of others who were sleeping. Fact 79. In some rural Irish traditions, waking the dead sitting with a corpse through the night before burial, was also a form of communal sleep disruption with social purpose. The wake kept the spirit of the deceased company during their transition. Mourners took turns sitting, talking, telling stories, eating, and sometimes drinking. The practice required people to stay awake through the night, an act of endurance framed as an act of love and duty. Fact 80. Across many of these traditions, night is not a void. It's a populated space. Spirits, ancestors, creatures, watchers, the nighttime world in cultures that precede electric light is full of presences. Sleep is an act of crossing into that populated space. The rituals surrounding sleep, prayers, charms, shared vigilance, dream interpretation, are strategies for navigating a territory that modern electrified culture has largely emptied. We turned on the lights and the night became simple darkness. For most of human history, it was something else. These observations describe what cultures believe happens inside the night. The next group of facts follows what happens inside the body, the biology that underlies every tradition we've encountered so far. Fact 81. For deep sleep to begin, core body temperature must drop by roughly 1 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. This isn't a preference, it's a requirement. The body accomplishes this by dilating blood vessels in the hands and feet, radiating heat outward through the skin. If core temperature stays elevated from a hot room, from fever, from heavy exercise close to bedtime, deep sleep is delayed or disrupted. Every cultural cooling ritual we've described tonight, from Scandinavian outdoor napping to sleeping on raised bamboo platforms in tropical Southeast Asia, works because it facilitates this thermal drop. Fact 82. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, a cluster of roughly 20,000 neurons located just above the point where the optic nerves cross, serves as the body's master circadian clock. It receives light information directly from the retina and uses that signal to synchronize the timing of sleep, hormone release, body temperature, and dozens of other rhythmic processes. When light hits the retina in the morning, the suprachiasmatic nucleus sends signals that suppress melatonin and increase cortisol. When darkness falls, the opposite sequence begins. Fact 83. Melatonin is not a sleep-inducing drug in the way most people imagine. It doesn't knock you out. It signals to the body that darkness has arrived and that the conditions for sleep are present. Think of it as an opening announcement rather than a sedative. The pineal gland, a pea-sized structure deep in the brain, releases melatonin into the bloodstream beginning roughly 2 hours before habitual sleep time. This gradual rise is called the dim light melatonin onset, and it marks the biological start of the body's nightly transition toward rest. Fact 84. Blue light with a wavelength of approximately 460 to 480 nanometers is the most potent suppressor of melatonin. This wavelength is abundant in daylight, which is why sunlight exposure in the morning helps set the circadian clock. But blue light is also emitted by phone screens, computer monitors, and LED lighting. Exposure to these sources in the evening delays melatonin onset, pushes back the body's readiness for sleep, and effectively tricks the suprachiasmatic nucleus into behaving as if the sun hasn't set. Fact 85. Pre-electric societies didn't face this problem. Their evening light sources, candles, oil lamps, hearth fires, emit light primarily in the red and orange wavelengths. These longer wavelengths have minimal effect on melatonin. A person reading by candlelight in a 17th century farmhouse was not disrupting their circadian rhythm. A person reading by LED screen light in a 21st century apartment is. The biology is the same. The light is different. Fact 86. The autonomic nervous system, the branch of the nervous system that controls involuntary functions like heart rate, digestion, and pupil dilation, operates as a balance between two divisions. The sympathetic division accelerates the body. Faster heartbeat, dilated pupils, redirected blood flow to muscles. The parasympathetic division slows it down. Slower heartbeat, constricted pupils, increased digestive activity. Sleep requires a shift toward parasympathetic dominance. The body must believe it is safe enough to slow down. Fact 87. Many cultural bedtime rituals work by activating the parasympathetic nervous system. Evening prayer involves slow, rhythmic breathing in a bowed or kneeling posture, both of which stimulate the vagus nerve, a major parasympathetic pathway. Group singing, common in many cultures as an evening activity, synchronizes breathing and lowers heart rate. Storytelling in a dim room lowers arousal by occupying the mind with narrative rather than with vigilance. These traditions preceded any understanding of the autonomic nervous system, but they engage it precisely. Fact 88. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve, running from the brainstem through the neck and into the chest and abdomen, carries about 80% of the parasympathetic signals in the body. Slow, deep exhalation activates it. Humming activates it. Gentle pressure on the abdomen activates it. Cold water on the face activates it. The vagus nerve is why a slow exhale feels calming. It's also why splashing cold water on your face during a panic attack can reduce heart rate within seconds. Fact 89. Sleep itself proceeds through a structured sequence of stages. Stage 1 is light sleep, a transitional phase lasting a few minutes. Stage 2 is deeper, marked by sleep spindles and K-complexes on an electroencephalogram, and accounts for roughly 50% of total sleep time. Stages 3 and 4, now often grouped as Stage 3 or slow-wave sleep, produce the large, slow delta waves associated with deep physical restoration. REM sleep, the stage associated with dreaming, occurs in cycles roughly 90 minutes apart. Each full cycle, light sleep through deep sleep through REM, takes about 90 to 110 minutes. Fact 90. During slow-wave sleep, the glymphatic system, a waste clearance network unique to the brain, becomes highly active. Cerebrospinal fluid flows through channels alongside blood vessels, flushing out metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking hours. One of these waste products is beta amyloid, a protein fragment associated with Alzheimer's disease. The glymphatic system operates at roughly 10 times its daytime rate during deep sleep. The brain is not idle during sleep. It is cleaning itself. Fact 91. Growth hormone is released primarily during deep sleep. In children, this drives physical growth. In adults, it supports tissue repair, muscle recovery, and immune function. The release of growth hormone is tightly linked to the first bout of slow-wave sleep, which typically occurs in the first 90 minutes after falling asleep. Disrupting early night sleep disproportionately reduces growth hormone secretion compared to disrupting sleep later in the night. Fact 92. Memory consolidation, the process of transferring information from short-term to long-term storage, occurs across all stages of sleep, but relies heavily on the interplay between slow-wave sleep and REM sleep. During slow-wave sleep, the hippocampus replays the day's experiences. During REM sleep, the neocortex integrates those replayed experiences into existing knowledge structures. A single night of poor sleep after learning something new can reduce retention by as much as 40%. Sleep doesn't just rest the brain, it reorganizes it. Fact 93. The body's sensitivity to pain increases with sleep deprivation. After just one night of restricted sleep, 4 hours instead of 8, pain thresholds drop measurably. The mechanism involves the somatosensory cortex, which becomes more reactive to pain signals when the brain is under-rested. Chronic pain conditions and chronic sleep deprivation frequently co-occur, creating a cycle that is difficult to break. Pain disrupts sleep, and disrupted sleep amplifies pain. Fact 94. Adenosine, a byproduct of cellular energy expenditure, accumulates in the brain throughout the day. It binds to receptors that promote drowsiness. The longer you're awake, the more adenosine builds up, and the stronger the sleep pressure becomes. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors. It doesn't reduce the adenosine, it just prevents you from feeling its effects. When the caffeine wears off, the accumulated adenosine floods the unblocked receptors, which is why caffeine withdrawal can produce sudden, heavy drowsiness. Fact 95. Cortisol, often called the stress hormone, follows a circadian rhythm of its own. Levels peak in the early morning, roughly 30 minutes after waking, and decline throughout the day, reaching their lowest point around midnight. This pattern, called the cortisol awakening response, helps the body mobilize energy for the day ahead. Evening cortisol elevation, caused by stress, worry, or late-night stimulation, opposes the body's natural move towards sleep. It's the biological equivalent of pressing the gas pedal and the brake at the same time. These biological facts describe the machinery beneath every sleeping tradition on Earth. Whether a culture practices two-phase sleep, Inemuri, outdoor infant napping, or communal hammock rest, the underlying engine is the same. A circadian clock driven by light and darkness, a thermoregulatory system that drops body temperature for sleep, and a nervous system that must shift from vigilance to calm before unconsciousness can arrive. The final facts widen toward something larger. Fact 96. Every known human culture has developed rituals for the transition from waking to sleep. The specific rituals differ: prayers in one tradition, songs in another, stories in a third, shared silence in a fourth. But the existence of a transition ritual is universal. No culture simply stops and sleeps. There is always a crossing period, a buffer zone between the activities of the day and the stillness of the night. The ritual marks the boundary. It says the waking part is finished. What comes next is different. Fact 97. The lullaby is one of the most widespread of these transitional rituals. Lullabies have been documented in every culture that has been studied. Their musical structure is consistent across languages: slow tempo, narrow pitch range, repetitive melody, descending pitch contour. These features aren't arbitrary. They mirror the acoustic qualities of a calm voice. They signal safety. A descending pitch contour, a melody that moves downward, is the opposite of an alarm call, which rises. The lullaby tells the listener, at a level below language, that nothing threatening is happening. Fact 98. In many indigenous Australian communities, a specific type of song called a maniquet is sung during the evening. These songs are not exclusively for sleep. They carry stories about the land, the ancestors, and the relationships between places. But their repetitive structure and steady rhythm serve a settling function. The mind follows the song instead of following its own worries. The song provides a track for attention to ride on, gently, until alertness loosens. Fact 99. The human brain, even during sleep, continues to monitor the environment. Sounds below a certain threshold are processed without waking the sleeper. A mother can sleep through traffic noise but wake instantly at her infant's cry. A soldier can sleep through artillery at a distance but wake at the sound of footsteps nearby. The sleeping brain isn't shut down. It's running a reduced operation, dimmed but not dark, quiet but still listening. Fact 100. Tonight, somewhere in the Maranhão state of Brazil, a Guajajara parent is tying a hammock knot for a child. The knot is the same kind their grandparents tied. The child will sleep suspended above the floor, rocking gently with each breath, surrounded by the sounds of other sleepers in the longhouse. Somewhere in Tokyo, a salaryman is closing his eyes in a fluorescent-lit conference room. His head nods. His pen rests against a notepad. The meeting continues without him. No one remarks on it. He has worked since 7 in the morning. His sleep is red as proof of that. Somewhere in Stockholm, a child lies in a pram on a balcony. The air is -4 degrees Celsius. The child is wrapped in wool and sheepskin. Her cheeks are pink. Her breathing is slow and even. Her mother checks the baby monitor, sips her coffee, and reads. 3 sleepers, 3 continents, 3 traditions older than the reasons anyone remembers for keeping them. And all of them are doing the same thing. Their core temperatures are dropping. Their melatonin is rising. Their parasympathetic nervous systems are tilting the balance away from alertness, away from action, toward the slow and quiet place where the body repairs itself and the brain reorganizes what it learned today. The traditions are different. The biology is the same. It has always been the same. Every hammock, every futon, every feather bed, every prayer murmured in the dark, every lullaby descending in pitch, every shared silence between 2 people lying side by side. These are all local translations of a single biological event, a crossing from one state to another that happens roughly 25,000 times in a human life. We dress it in meaning. We surround it with ritual. We tell our children stories to ease them across the threshold. And the threshold itself doesn't care about the stories. It operates on temperature and chemistry and the ancient rhythm of light and dark that has governed this planet for 4.5 billion years. You are near that threshold now. Your body has been moving toward it for a while. Your breath has slowed. Your muscles have softened. The thoughts that held their shape an hour ago are beginning to blur at the edges. This is the crossing. It doesn't need a hammock or a longhouse or a prayer book or a song. It just needs you to stop holding on and let the night do what it has always done. Sleep well. Good night from Bedtime Science.